Hey folks, Lana here coming at you with another video, and this video is inspired by a case study that I heard about on improving airline flight crash rates. Basically, in the past, there were co-pilots and pilots, just as there are now, but the crash rates were much higher. And a study was done, and essentially what was happening was that they found that the co-pilots, when the co-pilots were flying, crash rates were lower than when the actual pilot with more experience and seniority was flying. And what they found was, the reason behind it was because when the co-pilot was flying, the pilot who had more seniority and experience felt more comfortable calling out issues when they saw them. Whereas when the pilot was flying, the co-pilot, being less senior, felt less empowered to point out if they saw something that could be troubling. And so therefore, that pilot wasn't actually having that full set of second eyes, because that second set of eyes was too afraid to say anything, or to say it assertively or soon enough. And so what they did was implement protocol and procedure that requires the co-pilot to point out things as they're noticing it in a very clear, concise, assertive way. So it's not left up to judgment, or they don't have to, so it's not just a judgment, and they are not acting on their own principle and fear of insulting the more senior pilot. So they start out by having to say something along the lines of, pilot, I'm noticing that. Pilot, I'm uncomfortable by. And then pilot, something along the lines of, pilot, this situation is unsafe and I'm going to have to take over. So it's very clear, it's noticing something, it's saying that they're uncomfortable with it, and it's asking for action to be taken, and if action is not taken, then they can take the reins. And this concept of sort of empowering folks who aren't in a leadership position to express dissenting views to those above them is so important for any kind of organization, but also in relationships, in that I think I know in the way I was raised, feeling like obviously parental authority to some degree is necessary, right? Our parents know better than children and have more power to act and experience and etc., etc. But I think as a teen especially, feeling like you have no say and no control over things that are affecting you can really suck. And I remember that being like one of the best feelings when I moved out of the house, was like, yes, I now have full control over what happens to me, what I do. And that is so empowering. And so I think finding ways to empower our children and empower folks in our relationships to be a part of decisions and taking responsibility for what's happening around them is so important. Because it's not just about who's making the decisions and who's deciding what we do and what we don't do, but I think it also comes to like conflict management and helping us grow and change in a family dynamic or in a relationship. If all of our eyes are trained to look for possible pitfalls or ways that we can improve, that's better than one set of eyes or two sets of eyes. And if those eyeballs feel comfortable saying, hey, I noticed that we've been eating, I don't know, this is a really basic example, but I noticed that we've been eating a lot of junk food lately. Want to like meal prep together this Sunday and look up a healthy meal and prepare it together? Like, that obviously would create some kind of positive change. And I think in sort of parenting or like relationship dynamics with a spouse, with a primary partner that you maybe share a home with, it can be easy to fall into one area of the life, house, relationship being one person's domain and another being another person's domain. And there is something to be said about delegation, and some people will be able to do things more efficiently than others, and so that's sort of economies of scale, I don't know, of efficiency. But I think in true partnership, even though one person might be leading an area, like let's say I cook more in my relationship, it's nice to know that there's someone else still looking out for what's happening, appreciating what's happening, and there to support if need be. And I guess it depends on what kind of relationship style you want to have, but that team atmosphere, that partnership, being able to have somebody that is taking equal responsibility for the relationship or what happens in your lives, I think for me is really important and helpful, and something that I value a lot in my marriage is that neither of us are too afraid to tell each other how it is or how we're feeling. We may not like it, we may not like what we hear every time, but we say it anyways in service to each other's growth and our relationship. And I think as soon as in a partnership, one of the people becomes like that timid co-pilot, afraid of their more senior colleague, and keeps things inside, well, one, resentment grows, but two, you're losing so many opportunities to work through something together and become stronger, and to trust the other person more deeply with handling your concerns in a respectful manner. And this makes me think of another podcast that I was listening to with Esther Perel, where she was interviewing this couple who they're business partners. And one of the things that they were reflecting on in terms of a gratitude point about their relationship was that they disagree on a lot of things, but they disagree respectfully, and that's because of their greater value for living in a society and a democracy where we can have differing opinions and engage in still constructive and respectful conversations and disagreements. And I thought, wow, yeah, like that's also a value in my relationship. Like Greg and I do not agree on all areas of life or social issues for that matter. And I think any time that I've seen in somebody this sort of reaction to something they disagree with just like shutting down and being like, you're wrong, or like, I can't have a conversation with you, I go, whoa, like, I find that not scary, but alarming. And of course, like, I don't do this perfectly all the time. I've got family members where I avoid topics of conversation because I know that we're going to disagree and it's going to be uncomfortable. But it was a good reminder to me of that, like, I practice this in my relationship. We call each other out and we bring things up and we wade through the discomfort, knowing that it'll make us stronger. So why can't I do that with other relationships in my life? And of course, there's fear, there's insecurity, there's avoidance. We may not want to have uncomfortable conversations with our parents about how we may have been hurt by them in the past, or we may not want to bring up politics at the dinner table because we know Uncle Larry is going to have his own views, and you can't argue with Uncle Larry. But I think that it puts sometimes boundaries are good, right? There are cases where it's safety first, right? But it can put so many walls up around what you can and can't say and how you can and cannot interact. And I think so many of us are so afraid of just discomfort in general, of not just like rejection, or not just of like, I'm not sure what this person's going to say, but like being hurt by what someone else might say, or literally just, yeah, the uncomfortable feeling of being at odds with somebody and sitting in that tension. And that's, I think, is supposed to be a pretty natural part of life. Everything's push and pull. Rarely is everything in perfect harmony. And I think the more that we avoid wading through that tension by either avoiding discussing topics out in the open altogether, or shutting people down and shaming them for having a certain perspective or bringing things up, we will become even more and more polarized and divided as a society, but in our relationships too. We will become further and further apart on opposite polar ends of how you feel about your relationship, or certain dynamics within that relationship. Or yeah, become at polar ends of viewpoints within your family. And that's really hard to find your way back together from, once you've broken down so much trust and created so much distance. Yeah. And so I think really what I'm trying to share in this video is any way that you can empower yourself and those that you are in relationship with, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a working relationship, familial, friendship relationship, any way you can empower those that you're in relationship with to speak up and say what they think, good or bad, and not fear consequences, negative consequences, or fear a rupture of the relationship. Like, do that. That's so, so important. Because wouldn't you rather have people telling you the truth? Like, we only see so much about ourselves and about life. So having a second opinion, a third opinion, a fourth opinion, to say, hey, I noticed this. Have you thought about this in this way? We need to also be secure enough in ourselves and to not let that be those things be attacks on our ego, right? But I'd rather get the truth than a nice lie. I'd rather know what's going on rather than having my co-pilot let me crash into the side of a mountain. I'd rather have someone point out that mountain before we get there. You know, I'd rather have the opportunity to turn things around, to turn the plane around. And that's just me. Obviously, everyone's different. But yeah, how can you bring radical honesty into your life in more frequently? I think radical honesty is definitely a practice that I've implemented in my marriage, and I think it's really served us well. And we were only able to do that, and are only able to do that because of such a trusting relationship that we built upon when things turned romantic. And so trust is so, so important. So trust and respect of each other as unique individuals. Your partner is not you and should not be you. They are their own unique person, their own viewpoints and upbringing and etc., etc. I don't want to date another me. So I'm going to cut it off here so I don't keep rambling. Hope this was helpful. Hope this metaphor of the pilot and co-pilot helped you maybe see things in a different light, and maybe there's some lessons there to apply to the relationships in your life. All right, see you in the next one, folks. Take care.